Welcome to Melt. I'm Suresh Venkat. We're talking consumer behavior on the show today on the back of Kantar's recently launched Brand Footprint Report. Launched last month, the report tracks brands and consumer choices by measuring CRPs or consumer reach points, all in an effort to measure the mass appeal of the brand and the number of times it is bought. To know more, we are in conversation with K Ramakrishnan or Ramki, Managing Director of South Asia Worldpanel Division at Kantar. Is there a secret to driving brand penetration? Do regional brands pose any challenge to national brands? Has consumer behavior changed over the last year? Let's find out as we get ready to melt with K Ramakrishnan. Ramki, welcome back to Melt.
Thank you, Suresh. Pleasure.
So, Kantar recently released the 11th edition of your brand footprint report in India. And for those of our viewers who are watching this for the first time, what exactly is a brand footprint?
So there are several ways in which you can measure and rank brands. Some people do it on the basis of financial results, such as, let's say, revenue or market share and things like that. There are some who measure it on the basis of brand equity. Kantar does it through its brand Z. Then there are some others who do it on the basis of the trust that the consumer has on the brand, etc. So this is another metric in brand footprint where we base the metric on something called as consumer reach points. So consumer reach points is basically what we believe is that the ultimate strength test for a brand, particularly in FMCG, is in the final moment of truth when you're choosing a brand. When you walk into a shop or even when you're online, you're picking up a brand for the final moment. That's when you decide that I'll go for this instead of another, because till that moment, you can be vacillating. So we believe that's the strength test. And so therefore, we measure that through this metric called consumer reach points. This consumer reach points is a very simple formula of three different things. One is the population of households. Second is the penetration of a given brand. Penetration is defined as if there are 100 people, how many of them bought a brand in a given period of time? And in this particular case, 2022. So that's a penetration. The third is how often did you buy, right? So population, penetration, and frequency. The product of all this is consumer reach points. And then we rank brands on the basis of this, and the highest brand is the top ranked brand.
Ramki, every marketer and every market analyst like yourself has a different definition of the word brand. In your personal definition, what is a brand?
Okay, in my view, brand is something that gives a very significant identifier in the consumer's mind of a product, right? There are biscuits, there are multiple types of biscuits. But in the mind of the consumer, based on several factors such as maybe the taste, maybe the smell or the associations that they've had with them in their childhood, or even several of these non-physical factors, they associate that with a particular brand. And that's what I mean by brand, which is a combination of physicality and intangibles.
Now let's dive into the report. For the 11th year in a row, brand Parle continues to hold the top spot. What about brand Parle makes it such a favorite with people across the country?
Huge congratulations to Parle on this. That said, I think, like I said, we measure on the basis of what is called consumer reach points, which is a combination of penetration, frequency, and population. Let's leave population aside because brands can't control that. But penetration and frequency, Parle has done phenomenal work in terms of enhancing the penetration. They're available deep and wide in the country in all nooks and corners. And also by the sheer nature of the category of biscuits, people buy it more often, consumers buy it more often. So frequency is also high and they do a lot of efforts on penetration. So as a combination, they end up being on the top.
Now, consumer reach points, according to your report, have risen by 50% in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
And these include the lockdown years.
Correct.
Is this a normal rate of increase, or is India seeing an explosion of these consumer reach points?
I would say it's more normal because 50% over 5 years is if it averages out to less than that on an annual basis. Mm-hmm. But even during the lockdown phase, consumption was quite high because people were consuming for consumption inside the household, not outside. So therefore, this 50% over 5 years is not out of the way.
Again, according to your report, beverages are the largest growing consumer segment this year. Can you break this down for us? Why is India consuming so many beverages?
Okay, so I'll have to explain that. It's more because of the year in consideration is 2022, right? And we're not talking about 2023. The situation in 2023 can be different because summers have not been as they usually are. Now, beverages is a combination of hot and cold beverages. Let's first talk about cold beverages. Now, 2022 in comparison to 2021. 2021 summer was exactly when the second wave of COVID hit. So therefore, to that extent, outdoor consumption was very poor. Soft drink consumption itself was poor. And so therefore, on that base, the growth was significant in 2022 for cold beverages. Now, when you come to hot beverages, a lot of efforts have been made by brands such as Nescafe and the others who've done a lot of work on penetration. In fact, Nescafe is one of the brands that's called out as making significant penetration gains even globally. Interestingly, On all the new consumers of Nescafe that they added around the world, 63% have come from India.
In a chai drinking country.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and that speaks volumes about the contribution that India can play in the global, map of brands.
This year, your study is also mapped out of home. Can you explain what exactly the out of home study maps?
Absolutely. So, you know that our data is based on panels, right? We have a household panel and we have an out of home panel. The out of home panel is very new. It's just 1 year old. Household panel, basically is a panel of about 83,000 households across India, whom we track every month in terms of what FMCG they buy. So we make a note of what they buy, verified with wrappers and things like that. And with that is what we build all our intelligence and data from. So whatever is tracked in household panel is purchases made for consumption inside the house. Like if you buy a packet of biscuits, but it's meant for consumption. Whereas many times what happens is you go to your office or you go outside to meet friends, you consume biscuits, you consume soft drinks, you consume burgers, whatever. So those are out of home consumption, which is purchases made for consuming outside of the home. That is out of home. While the consumer is the same, the triggers or what makes you make a choice sometimes varies whether it's in-home or out of home, which is the reason why we introduced this ranking based on out of home separately.
And does measuring out of home present any unique challenges to the study?
In the household panel, what happens is we go to one member in the household for everybody. Because all the consumption happens inside the house, it's easy to keep track. Whereas when a person goes out, it's more individuals than households. So that individual, they have to remember at that point of time to report. So therefore, the out of home measurement is by means of an app. So they instantly measure, instantly report to us. So therefore, from that point of view, there's a huge variance between these two in terms of the measurement methodology.
Now, coming to your out of home survey, Britannia leads the list in out of home in consumer reach points.
Yeah.
What does this say about Britannia's strategy?
I would say you would look at it as a combination. I mean, any biscuit brand, the category itself is about, let's say, 65% in-home and 35% out of home. So therefore, they definitely, all biscuit brands work both from a point of view of how do I make my presence at home much higher and how do I make my distribution and presence out of home easily within the reach of somebody when somebody wants to take a quick bite or something like that. So from that point of view, both the brands, Britannia and Parle, have done a brilliant job, both in-home and out of home. And in the out of home space, perhaps in the year 2022, Britannia has done a job of making itself more available, more freely, and from that point of view, at the right size, in the right pack size and the right pricing to be able to reach this high figure of consumer reaching points in the out-of-home measurement.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about what's happening in these out-of-home stores. Is anything new happening there? You said right size, right price point, right configuration.
Yeah.
Are there any other triggers that are invisible to the layman, but you can see it?
No, so there are some very interesting trends which come out of the out-of-home panel if we see year after year. In the last 1 year's data, if we see, there are huge differences in the way different markets react. Like, for example, one would have thought that North India is a hugely social kind of market, etc. However, if you look at out-of-home consumption, there is a lot of solo consumption in the north of India. Like you would have thought that when you consume soft drinks, for example, bottled soft drinks, the expectation is that you would in the north of India, you'll typically consume with a bunch of friends. But data clearly says that a large part of soft drink consumption out of home in the north of India is more solo than together. That's exactly the opposite in the south, which is not what you would normally expect. So this is contrary to popular belief, right? So every time like this, data comes and surprises us, because if you have a notion and an assumption, it comes and says, listen, you're not the one to assume. There's always data to back yourself on.
So then let me ask you a hypothetical.
Yeah.
If you were a soft drink marketer and you were crafting a strategy for North India versus South India, how would you craft your strategy?
So the point is, like I said, the consumer is still the same. So from that point of view, my task will always be to make sure that the thirst quotient or that refreshment quotient at that point of time is enhanced, whether you're alone or together. So from that point of view, my strategy will not be vastly different for the two different markets, but perhaps my distribution will be different. Perhaps my pack sizing will be different, because if I'm having it alone, my chances of going for a smaller single serve kind of pack will be higher. When I'm consuming it with others, I'll probably buy a bigger pack. So that will be my pack play in this.
Okay. Now, conversely, Parle is number 5 in out of home. They're number 1 overall, but number 5 in the out of home.
Yeah.
Can you explain this variance?
There's a huge difference in out of home and in-home, the consumers in in-home and out of home. One thing I have to add here is that the in-home measurement is for India, urban as well as rural put together, whereas the out-of-home measurement is fundamentally urban, because we have not yet gone rural there. Now, a whole lot of rural India consumes biscuits as a regular, even meal accompaniment. In fact, along with tea, they have it as a biscuit. So to that extent, their in-home presence is substantially higher. That's much more than what they do out of home. That's perhaps the reason why the difference is. That said, Number 5 is still a very, very significant position to take as far as CRPs are concerned, even in out of home.
Ramki, what is your overall interpretation of the trends in out-of-home consumption? You said it's only urban, not rural, so we'll stick to urban.
Yeah.
Overall trends, if you were to take a 10,000 feet view, what do you see as the overall trends?
So, I think it's the revenge of the out of home, I would say, because there were 2 years of being locked up and not consuming enough. Now it's actually coming out. People are consuming much more outside. In fact, the percentages of every category in out of home is only increasing. So to that extent, people are being more outgoing, consuming more. We have a long way to go. I mean, there's one measure that some of these restaurant companies use, which is called average number of eating out occasions. And India's at a number anywhere between 10 and 15. And I'm told countries like Thailand are at 35 and 40. So we have a long way to go, but then huge growth from where we were. So it's kind of a revenge of the out-of-home consumption.
There are brands like Anmol, Yellow Diamond and Bisque Farm. These brands caught me off guard in the top 25 of your out-of-home rankings. Now, these are not new age startups. They're companies like I said, Anmol, Yellow Diamond and Bisque Farm. My question to you is a bit lateral. What can new age startups who are trying to penetrate these markets learn from these slightly unknown brands?
Yeah. So I would answer it slightly differently in the sense that all the 3 brands that you mentioned, Anmol, Bisque Farm, etc., have been in the market for a very, very long time. They're not new at all. It's just that their geographic distribution may be limited and they've not come to be a national brand as yet. But from a startup's perspective, there are lots of lessons to learn from, let's say, the personal care or in the home care perspective, where they are starting with being a direct-to-consumer brand, which is I first reach you online, and once I reach a certain scale, I see the need for me to go offline. I mean, classic example of brands like, let's say, Purple or brands like Mama Earth and things like that. Yeah. They're all fine being D2C up to let's say a point of 100 crore or 150 crore. I don't know what the magic number is. But once they touch that number, they see that the growth to explode from there on, they have to definitely grow offline. So therefore, they move from there. So it's possible for a new age startup to be a D2C brand, but they definitely need to be prepared to go offline at a given time for them to continue their growth path.
Another talking point in your study is the 1 billion consumer reach point club.
Yeah.
Right? Of these, there are 4 new brands from what I understand. There's Lux, Sunsilk, Nirma. These 3 are understandable.
Yeah.
The 4th is a company called Balaji Wafers.
Yeah.
Are they a one-product company and how do they have 1 billion touch points?
Yeah, so Balaji Wafers is a hugely successful, fundamentally wafer kind of brand. They make wafers. And unlike the ones that you and I may have heard of, they're hugely popular in some parts of the country. And they started off as a wafer brand, but they're now moved on to categories such as even noodles and masalas and things like that. So using all this, you can be present in lesser number of states, but in that state, if you have a colossal dominance, you can still get a large number of consumer reach points. There are several brands in India which are present in 1 state and 2 states, but very, very dominant in those states. Balaji is one of them.
Is there largely a distribution play then? They're so deeply well penetrated there because we don't see too much of their advertising or too much of their marketing efforts.
We don't see it in Mumbai, but in their respective markets, you see enough of them. I mean, their medium of communication could be wall paintings, could be hoardings, outdoor presence, etc. But they're huge in those respective markets. They may not be nationally present, but in the markets where they are very dominant.
Moving on to the next category, health and beauty brands, according to your report, growth has been slower this year.
Yeah.
Does this spell bad news for all the D2C startups that we just talked about?
Not really. I think it's more a bunching of health and beauty. So that health part is what has brought down this thing. Health, again, it's a comparison with the pandemic year. We consumed a lot of sanitizers. We consumed a lot of hand wash. All those things dropped in 2022.
Dolo 650, I think, went through the roof during the...
Yeah, absolutely right. So all those things dropped in the year 2022 and that perhaps pulled it down. And it's not bad news for beauty at all.
Okay, moving on to brands like Sargam, Bhagwati and Vidisha. Now, these brands may be alien to our urban consumers, urban viewers. Can you tell us a bit about what these brands are made of and what their genesis is?
Yeah, I think the fundamental story is that local brands are making a resurgence. At any point of time, if you take a household, there is always a contest between national brand, local brand and unbranded all together. And each one has a different play depending upon the level of inflation, depending upon level of raw material or commodity pricing. All of these have a play between all the 3. Now, local brands had a bad years during COVID and the following year. COVID because typically a consumer, when there is uncertainty, a consumer gravitates towards known brands or national brands.
Flight to quality, as it were.
Absolutely. Yeah. So when the uncertainty goes, they tend to experiment a little more. As luck would have it, local brands had another bad year in the inflationary phase when very high inflation, very difficult to import raw materials, and at the same time, their latitude in increasing prices is very, very limited, unlike a national brand. A national brand will have a large portfolio, so they may have a loss leader, keep that pricing, but make the money somewhere else. Local brands don't tend to do that. So given all this, they had 2 very bad years. Against those 2 very bad years, now they're making a comeback because inflation is eased down a bit and uncertainty, I won't say has gone off, but reduced. So people are willing to experiment a lot more. And so this is the time of local brands. So it's like a cycle. At this moment, it's a cycle of the local brands. Now, talking specifically of the 3 brands that you mentioned, again, they are super dominant in the states that they are. I'll give you an example of, you mentioned 3 brands.
Sargam, Bhagwati and Vidisha.
You take Sargam, for example. Sargam has a penetration of 35% in Maharashtra, which means 1/3 of Maharashtra has bought Sargam at least once in a year. So it's that big a brand. It's just that they're not national. It's just that we don't see them as much. So, but there are lots of these brands which are making a strong comeback.
And do FMCG marketers take these brands seriously enough, in your opinion?
Absolutely, absolutely. Because India is not a scenario where
every 100 kilometers you're going to get brand new FMCG local brands, right?
So India has some 30 countries within itself. So each one is a separate market strategy, and I'm sure most brand marketers have understood that. In fact, there are many who were very, very clear that micro marketing and clusters, going in and finding the answers in a local situation is what works substantially more. Media could be anything. You could still be on television, digital, whatever it may be. But the local understanding becomes that much more important, and that many marketers have been successful in doing that. And they do definitely keep a track.
Does your study make a marketer's life that much more difficult because now they have to understand at a granular level all these brands?
I would actually flip it. It makes it that much more easier because we are telling them there is somebody like that and this is the number at which they are. So therefore, we believe that we are helping them more than we are making it difficult. Yeah.
Now let's talk about your penetration list. ITC, Sunfist, Godrej Soap and Nescafe have topped the list for penetration. What does this tell us about those brands and their strategies?
There are lots of studies which have been done empirically and with data by many what I would call as marketing scientists that have said that a brand growth, how does it correlate with penetration versus anything else? And they've concluded that penetration is one of the strongest drivers of brand growth itself. So therefore, now if you see most FMCG organizations, the topmost management, one of the key metrics that they are measured on will be penetration of their brands. So therefore, every big brand, every brand of repute definitely tracks and follows penetration. Now, all the brands that you spoke about, which is either
ITC, Sunfeast, Godrej No. 1 and Nescafe.
All of them have worked only on penetration. Sunfeast clearly has worked on penetration.
And Sunfeast has been struggling with penetration for a while to compete with the more dominant biscuit brands, has it not?
Actually, no. They've consistently been growing, but their maximum growth has happened in the last year. They've had a 9 percentage point increase in their penetration, fundamentally on account of 2 things. One is they've done a lot of varianting within their brands of EP, etc. and a lot of small pack play as far as rural is concerned. Both of these put together have driven the growth for Sunfeast. Nescafe is focused a lot more on the younger audiences, smaller pack sizes, and all these put together drove penetration for Nescafe. So the Godrej No. 1 very clearly focused on specific markets, what we call it the micro marketing specialists they are. They've done an amazing job on that in order to get their penetration growth.
Let's move to beverages. Fruity and Thumbs Up seem to be the most chosen out-of-home beverages in India.
Yeah.
Fruity, obviously mango. Thumbs Up, obviously an Indian masala flavored cola.
Yeah.
Does this indicate a strong consumer preference for so-called Indian or Indian tasting drinks?
No, absolutely. I mean,
I noticed Sprite is at number 5.
Yes, that's correct. That's correct. So that's very clear. I mean, in the sense that the Indian palate is different and the preferences that the Indian palate has always been that way, which is what makes a McDonald's have an aloo tikki burger in India at all in the first place. So therefore, the palate is different, and so to that extent, preferences are based on what they've grown up on, and we've all grown up on Thumbs Up, and so therefore, the presence of Thumbs Up definitely makes us prefer that against anything else. And Fruity, of course, mango, there is a large franchise of people who like mango, and so therefore, they even prefer the mango-based drinks against cola variants, etc. So that's the reason why it is there. All this said and done, the Indian palate is important. Indian palate is extremely important to be taken cognizance of and cannot be taken for granted.
The final question, update on artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
How is it impacting your job?
Interesting, and I definitely want to answer this question because we are using artificial intelligence to add to our own intelligence in the sense that what would have taken us a lot of time in terms of back end. Like for example, let's take, we have a panel called the cosmetic panel where we track cosmetics that people buy, and the input that we get is actually pictures. So how do you then match these pictures to what is the brand? We can do it manually. Somebody can look at it and read it, etc. But AI is helping us in that space in terms of identifying that quickly and to that extent, making the data available faster and therefore decision making faster for marketers. So to that extent, AI definitely is helping us in terms
Assisting
of
the job, not stealing anybody's job as
not
of
at the
now.
moment. Definitely, it is assisting us, and we believe that will be the case. Yes.
And with that, Ramki, thank you very much for talking to us once again at Melt.
My pleasure, Suresh. Thank you for having me over.
And now, time for a creative pick. We're turning the spotlight to a recent film from Nike. This one is for the ongoing FIFA Women's World Cup. Titled What the Football, the film cleverly showcases the varied skills of top female footballers, and in the tradition of all Nike ads, it's a fun watch. Take a look.
The USA could win it all right here. Chastain will take it. This is it. Will she make history?
Dad?
Did we win?
Yeah, we won, and we're going for a fifth.
What year is it?
Oh, it's our year. Sophia Smith, she's so good, it's scary. But we can't count out England. They just brought it home, and they got a secret weapon, Chloe Kelly.
Chloe Hui?
We're in the middle of a very important time. The competition is better than ever.
Wait a minute, just slow down.
Like Kadisha Buchanan, she controls the tempo.
Got it.
You don't. You haven't seen Graske Euro yet.
Tell me more.
Her delivery is the most reliable delivery service in the world.
This is insane.
No, this is insane.
Whoa, what is this?
That's Dabinha. She's from Brazil.
She's good.
I know it's a lot to process that, and I don't want to overwhelm you, but... Also, that's faster than fast. Huang Shuan's the heart of Chinese football.
Where are we?
Alex Morgan makes the hardest play look effortless.
Who?
We got a new American hero.
Whoa.
And Sam Kerr, she's flipping the game.
Excuse me?
It's a good day to be awake, Dad. Let's ask your granddaughter.
What the
Football!
And with that, it's a wrap on this episode. You can follow Melt on social media. The handle is Ready to Melt, or simply log on to readytomelt.com. If you'd like to follow me, it's @Suvenk on Twitter. Till next week, goodbye and thanks for watching.